So here we are at the Contemporary Art Museum, St. Louis, and this is an exhibition that wants to be about a kind of unknowing, about the undefinable, not having definite knowledge, about not being sure about what you're looking at. The very first work in the show is out here in the lobby, and it's just this speaker on a wall. It's a sound piece. It's a work by a Belgian artist named Marcel Broodters. And this is a piece that I can't really listen to without cracking up. It's really funny. It's in French, although you don't really even need to know French to appreciate the piece. But it's the artist explaining art to his cat. And his cat keeps squealing.
Ce que vous attendez.
It makes me laugh. I think this is a really strong opening for this show. These are works by Rachel Harrison, who's a sculptor working in New York. And for me, these talk about the idea of not knowing by just being completely inexplicable. You know, there's a kind of a pink column, like stuccoed, like frosting. And on top of it is a hammer and a fake lemon. You know, what's that about? It's a kind of very obvious example of that idea of not knowing, looking for the black cat in the dark room.
Okay, let me ask, is it okay for art to be totally, deliberately inexplicable?
Anything's okay. We were speaking the other day about the question about, is it art?
Right.
You know, and I told you that I don't think that's a very interesting question. I think now that it's like 2009, we've had 100 years of things that might or might not be art. I think we'd take it at face value that something is art. The question for me is it interesting art? You know, is it art that makes us think about something more than just the question of is it art? Is it something that makes us think at all? Here we've got a really, really interesting part of this show, and that's the juxtaposition of historical work with the contemporary work. So on the other side of the room we have Rachel Harrison, but right here we have a painting by Morandi from 1963. So this is a 45-year-old painting. And you kind of have to wonder, what does this have to do with the theme of the show? What is this painting of a beautiful still life of bottles? You know, it's a gorgeous painting. There's no argument with that. But what does it have to do with this idea of not knowing? Everything seems to me pretty clear in this painting. We know what it is. We know what Morandi did. He's a sort of known quantity. What's it doing here? And weirdly, that brings up a question of unknowingness with regard to curatorial intention. And I'm not sure if that was the intention of the curator here. So it kind of calls into question this entire enterprise, which might or might not be its point. This is a work by Matt Mulliken, who's another well-known artist. And this is a work that takes up 2 entire walls of a gallery. You know, it's a collection of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of individual works. You know, there's photographs, there's drawings, there's Xeroxes, there's prints, there's a little bit of everything. This is work that I find actually quite annoying. This asks a lot of the viewer. You know, one of the things that this has to do with the theme of the show, with this idea of the ineffable or the undetermined, is that it's impossible to actually put all of this stuff together in any kind of meaningful way. And that's one of the meanings of the piece.
So do you get the feeling you're being put on?
No, I get the feeling that I'm being asked to entertain a lot of pretension. This is a work by an artist named David Holfish Bailey, who works in Los Angeles. And similar to the Matt Mulliken piece, it's a big collection of stuff. You know, it's a sort of, I guess it's a boat trailer. And it's filled with all kinds of things, from like wire mesh screens to spools of rope and thread to this kind of telescopic magnet board with various images on it, you know, a kind of collapsible hose like from a vacuum cleaner, garden hoses, some Legos. It's got a little bit of everything. It's meant to make us think of some kind of nomadic traveler, maybe. This would be his trailer taking all of this stuff around. You know, it's trying to create a narrative, maybe build a character in our minds. Unfortunately, like that Matt Mulliken piece, I think it's a lot of noise about nothing in the end. I don't find myself really compelled by it to actually think about it very hard. You know, I understand what it's trying to do, trying to create that narrative or character. And I don't find myself caring very much. So here we are at the end of the exhibition, and in this sort of impossible central space of the Contemporary Art Museum, and there's two works, sort of very empty room with just two works. One of them is this. It's by an artist team named David William, and that's two artists working together. And it's some kind of game. So what you're meant to do is come in, you know, sit down on the little stool. And again, it's a hard stool, you know, you're not comfortable. And the game pieces, they're basically colored squares with moire patterns. You'll find the rules of the game somewhere if you're lucky, and you're supposed to sit down and figure this out. Really? Would you actually spend your time doing this? This is the final work in the show. It's by an artist named Mariana Castillo de Ball, who's a Mexican artist working in Europe. And it's a piñata. It's in the form of a Klein flask, which is a kind of, it's like a Mobius strip of glassware. You know, the inside is the outside and the outside is the inside. But here it's in the form of a papier-mâché piñata. And I guess we're supposed to think, oh, what's inside the piñata? You know, that might be the sort of unknowingness as well as the shape of the vessel. And the museum is even advertising the piñata breaking in a few weeks as a big event. You know, show up and break the piñata and find out what's inside. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. You know, for me, it seems like you're taking the idea of art and turning it into a kind of spectacle for children. I don't find that a very compelling idea. I don't really care what's inside the piñata.
So did we find the black cat in the dark room that isn't there?
I think the black cat really wasn't there. This is an exhibition that starts off very, very strongly and sort of ends with a whimper instead of a bang. And really the part I don't know, the unknowingness of the theme, really has to do a lot with curatorial intention for me. I don't really get it.